It was a warm Friday evening, the kind that made the city streets buzz with life. Inside a high-end Italian restaurant called Bellissimo, the air smelled of roasted garlic and simmering tomato sauce. While quiet jazz played in the background, the waitstaff moved gracefully between tables, their black uniforms crisp and polished. Among them was Emma, a young white waitress in her mid-20s who had been working there for nearly 2 years. She was known for her efficiency, but also for her sharp tongue and judgmental attitude toward customers who didn't fit her idea of wealthy. Tonight, as she scanned the room, her eyes landed on a woman standing at the entrance, a black woman, visibly pregnant, wearing a simple floral dress and holding her purse gently over her belly. Her hair was neatly tied, her posture confident but calm, and she looked around as if waiting for someone to assist her. Emma's first thought was that the woman had walked into the wrong place. Bellissimo wasn't the kind of restaurant people just wandered into. It was where the city's elite came to dine, where a single meal could cost more than most people made in a week. Emma frowned slightly, glancing at the hostess station. No reservation under that woman's name appeared on the screen. The pregnant woman smiled kindly, asking if there was a table available for one. Emma's lips curved into a polite but stiff smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. "We're fully booked tonight," she said quickly, without checking. But the woman didn't leave. She took out her phone and showed a confirmation message and email confirming her reservation under the name Mrs. Williams. Emma blinked. There it was, on the list, reserved under a VIP note marked by the manager himself. Confused but annoyed, she gestured toward a corner table near the kitchen, one of the least desirable spots in the restaurant. "This way," Emma said curtly. The woman followed quietly, lowering herself into the chair with visible effort. When Emma handed her the menu, her tone was clipped. "Just so you know, our prices are quite high," she added, her voice dripping with condescension. The woman gave a faint smile, as though she had heard such comments all her life, and had grown immune. "That's fine," she said softly. "I know what I want." She ordered the restaurant's most expensive dish, a plate of truffle pasta with white wine sauce and a bottle of imported sparkling water. Emma raised an eyebrow, scribbled the order, and walked off, muttering under her breath about people trying to look rich. As the night went on, the restaurant filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and soft candlelight. Emma moved between tables, always glancing back at the pregnant woman. The woman sat quietly, her hands folded over her stomach, occasionally smiling when she noticed other guests staring. She carried herself with a quiet strength that made Emma uneasy. Something about her calmness felt deliberate, as if she knew exactly what she was doing. When the meal was ready, Emma brought it over, placing the dish down a little too harshly. The fork clattered against the plate. The woman didn't react. She simply thanked her and began to eat slowly, savoring every bite. A few moments later, a group of young men at a nearby table started whispering and laughing, pointing in her direction. Emma smirked slightly, enjoying the small display of mockery. To her, the woman's presence disrupted the elegant harmony of the restaurant's image. She saw her not as a paying guest, but as someone undeserving of the luxury around her. When the woman raised her hand for a refill of her water, Emma pretended not to see. After several attempts, the woman finally called her over. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Could I have some more water, please?" Emma, already irritated, grabbed a glass of water from the counter, marched over, and whether from carelessness or a cruel impulse spilled right across the woman's lap. The cold liquid soaked her dress instantly, darkening the fabric and pooling on the floor. A gasp spread through the restaurant. The woman froze, her hands instinctively protecting her belly. Emma's eyes widened slightly, realizing what she had done, but she quickly covered her mistake with false concern. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. It was an accident," she said loudly, drawing attention from nearby tables. But her expression betrayed her. There was a hint of smugness, a flash of superiority she couldn't quite hide. The woman looked up at her, her eyes calm but sharp, and for a long, silent moment, they held each other's gaze. There was no shouting, no tears, no scene. The pregnant woman simply nodded, as if she had seen this kind of behavior before, and expected nothing less. Slowly, she stood up, dabbing the water from her dress with a napkin. "Accidents happen," she said quietly, her voice steady. Then she gathered her things and walked out, leaving behind a stunned silence. The other diners murmured in disapproval. One older couple even called the manager over, demanding that Emma be reprimanded. The manager, red-faced and panicked, rushed to smooth things over, offering apologies to the customers and scolding Emma harshly in the back room. But the damage was done. Emma shrugged it off, convincing herself that the woman probably couldn't afford to eat there anyway and had been embarrassed enough to leave. What she didn't know was that the woman's quiet exit wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something much larger. That night, as the restaurant closed and the staff cleaned up, a sleek black car pulled up outside. A man in a tailored suit stepped out, his presence radiating authority. He entered the restaurant and asked to see the manager. His voice was calm, polite, but carried a weight that made people listen. Emma peeked from behind the counter, curious. The man handed the manager a small card. On it was a family crest, something intricate, old, and unmistakably powerful. The manager's face turned pale. Emma couldn't hear the words, but she could see the fear spreading through the room like smoke. The man left soon after, leaving a chilling silence in his wake. Emma laughed nervously, thinking it was just some overprotective husband angry about the water incident. But when she clocked out and stepped outside, she noticed 2 black SUVs parked near her car. Her laughter faded. The memory of the woman's calm, knowing eyes echoed in her mind. She had dismissed her as ordinary, as someone beneath her notice. Yet now, standing under the glow of the streetlight, Emma began to feel an unease she couldn't explain. Something told her that the woman she had humiliated was no ordinary customer, and that her mistake was about to cost her far more than her job. The moment the pregnant woman walked out of Bellissimo, the restaurant's elegant calm returned, but only on the surface. Beneath it, a storm was already brewing, invisible, yet inevitable. The woman stepped into the cool night air, the fabric of her dress still damp from the spilled water. She took a deep breath, her expression unreadable, and slid into the back seat of a waiting black car. The driver, a broad-shouldered man in a tailored black suit, looked at her through the rearview mirror, his eyes searching for permission to speak. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked carefully. She nodded, wiping a drop of water from her hand. "Yes, Marco," she said softly, "but make the call." Marco's hand tightened briefly around the steering wheel, before he pulled out his phone and dialed the number stored under a single initial. L. The line rang once. On the other end of the call, in a sprawling mansion perched on the edge of the city, a man known only as Luca sat in his study, a glass of red wine untouched beside him. The room was silent, except for the soft ticking of a grandfather clock. When his phone buzzed, he glanced at the screen, immediately answering. Marco's voice came through, low and steady. "It happened again, boss," he said. This time, at Bellissimo, there was a pause. Luca's jaw tightened, and the stem of his glass creaked under the pressure of his grip. "Is she all right?" he asked, his tone even but dangerous. "She's fine," Marco replied, but it was public. The waitress dumped water on her, mocked her too. The silence that followed was heavier than steel. Luca set the glass down gently, his mind replaying every word. His wife, a woman who had once lived through more than most could endure, had been humiliated in a place he had personally funded years ago. Bellissimo's owner owed him favors, its very existence intertwined with his influence. That a member of his own circle had disrespected his wife was more than an insult, it was a message of carelessness, one he could not ignore. Luca's empire was built on control, precision, and loyalty. He ruled the city's underworld with an iron hand disguised in silk. People feared his name not because he shouted, but because he never had to. When he stood, the sound of his chair scraping against the marble floor echoed through the vast room. He didn't call his men immediately. Instead, he called his wife. The line connected after a moment, and her calm voice answered, "Yes, my love." For a brief moment, the tension in his shoulders eased. "Are you home?" he asked. "Almost," she replied. "It's not worth your anger." But her voice carried the faintest tremor, one he noticed instantly. "Someone made it worth my anger," he said quietly. "Tell me everything." She hesitated, then described what happened, how the waitress had looked at her, how she had been seated near the kitchen, how the water had spilled. She spoke without hatred, only sadness. Luca listened in silence, his hand tightening around the edge of his desk. When she finished, he simply said, "Go home. I'll handle it." By midnight, the lights in Bellissimo had long gone out, but 3 black cars rolled to a stop outside. The security cameras blinked out one by one as the power briefly flickered. Inside, only the manager remained, tallying receipts when he heard the front door creak open. His head shot up, his face draining of color as he recognized the tall figure entering the room. Mr. Luca," he stammered. Luca said nothing at first. He walked slowly, his polished shoes tapping against the tile, his eyes scanning the empty tables that only hours ago were filled with laughter. "You've done well for yourself," he said finally, his tone polite but cold. "A fine restaurant, good food, but you've let the wrong kind of people work for you." The manager swallowed hard, his hands trembling. I didn't know, Seth. If I had known who she was," Luca cut him off with a small wave of his hand. "You should treat every guest as if they matter," he said softly. "That's what makes a place worthy of respect." His words were calm, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Behind him, 2 of his men entered silently, carrying a small black case. Luca turned his attention to them. "Find her," he said simply. "The waitress Emma." The men nodded and left without another word. The manager began to stammer an apology, but Luca's cold stare silenced him. "You'll issue a public apology tomorrow morning," he said. "To my wife, by name, on every platform you have. And you'll do it before the restaurant opens. Am I clear?" The manager nodded quickly, his heart pounding in his chest. Luca turned to leave but paused at the door. "And fire that woman. I don't want her touching another plate in this city." Then he stepped out into the night, his coat catching the soft glow of the streetlight. The quiet hum of engines followed as the cars pulled away. Meanwhile, Emma slept soundly in her small apartment across town, unaware of the chain of events her actions had set in motion. Her phone buzzed repeatedly on the nightstand calls from her manager, but she ignored them, assuming it was about her being late again. When she finally woke, sunlight spilling across her bed, she saw over a dozen missed calls and a flood of messages. Confused, she scrolled through social media and froze. Her name was everywhere. A video of the incident, taken by a diner, had gone viral overnight. Millions of views, thousands of comments all condemning her behavior. The restaurant's official page had issued an apology, tagging her directly. Words like racist, disrespectful, and cruel filled her screen. Her chest tightened as she read further. The apology mentioned Mrs. Isabella Williams by name, though the post didn't include her husband's identity. Whispers in the comments already had. Someone claimed that Isabella was the wife of Luca Moretti, a powerful businessman with rumored Mafia ties. Emma's hands began to shake. Her first thought was disbelief, then fear. She tried to call the manager, but he didn't answer. When she arrived at the restaurant, the front door was locked, and a sign hung on the glass, closed for private event. Her stomach twisted as she saw two men leaning against a nearby black car, their eyes following her every move. She turned and walked away quickly, her pulse racing. Back at home, she closed her blinds and sat on her couch, replaying every detail of the night before. She remembered the calmness in the woman's eyes, the softness in her voice, and the quiet authority she carried without saying a word. It all made sense now. She had humiliated the wrong person. The internet's outrage was only the beginning. She feared something worse was coming, something that couldn't be captured on camera or erased with an apology. That afternoon, her phone buzzed again, an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. A deep, measured voice spoke. "Emma," it said, "Mr. Moretti would like to speak with you." In person, her heart stopped as the line went dead, and she realized that her careless cruelty had reached the ears of a man who did not forgive Isaac. Emma sat frozen on her couch, her phone still clutched in her trembling hand. The voice on the other end had been calm, composed, but there was something about its tone that chilled her to the core. She tried convincing herself it was just a prank, someone taking advantage of the viral video's attention, but deep down, she knew better. There was an unmistakable authority in that man's voice, the kind that didn't belong to ordinary people. Her thoughts raced back to the moment she poured water on that pregnant woman, the quiet look of disappointment in her eyes, the grace with which she had walked away without saying a word. Emma's stomach twisted with regret, but it was too late for remorse. She could feel the invisible net closing in around her. Slowly and silently, the phone rang again, this time from a different number. Her heart pounded as she hesitated, then answered. "Miss Emma Carter," a different male voice said, polite but clipped. "Yes," she stammered. "Who is this?" The man ignored her question. "You are requested to meet Mr. Moretti at the Bellissimo restaurant. You will come alone. The time is 6 p.m. sharp. Do not be late." Before she could respond, the call ended. The line went dead, leaving her sitting in suffocating silence. She tried calling the number back, but it was disconnected. Every instinct told her to stay home, to run, to hide, but another part of her, the part that was terrified of what would happen if she didn't show up, knew. She had no choice. The hours crawled by painfully. She couldn't eat, couldn't think straight. By 5:30, she forced herself to get ready, her hands shaking as she buttoned her blouse. She didn't know what to expect when she arrived, but she hoped desperately that she could apologize, that maybe her sincerity would be enough to make it right. When she finally reached Bellissimo, the streets were quiet. The restaurant dark, except for the warm light spilling from inside. Two men in black suits stood by the door, their expressions unreadable. As she approached, one of them opened the door wordlessly, gesturing for her to enter. The air inside was heavy with tension. Luca Moretti sat at a corner table, the same one his wife had been forced to sit at the night before. He was dressed immaculately, a dark suit that seemed to absorb the light around him. His presence was commanding, not loud or aggressive, but deeply controlled. His sharp eyes lifted the moment she stepped in. "Miss Carter," he said evenly, his voice smooth, yet dangerous in its restraint. "Please, sit." Her legs felt like they might give out as she crossed the room. She sat opposite him, avoiding his gaze, her fingers twisting in her lap. He studied her for a long moment, saying nothing. The silence stretched so long it became unbearable. Finally, he spoke. "Do you know who my wife is?" She swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. I didn't know at the time. I swear I didn't mean." He raised a hand, cutting her off. "My wife," he said quietly, "is a woman who has endured humiliation, discrimination, and pain for most of her life. She carries herself with dignity, no matter how cruel the world becomes. Last night, you made her relive things she should never have to relive again." His words weren't shouted, but each one landed with precision, sharp and deliberate. Emma felt tears stinging her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "It was stupid. I didn't think that," he said coldly, "is exactly the problem. You didn't think." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze locking onto hers. "In my world, Miss Carter, people who don't think make mistakes that cost lives. You made a mistake that cost you your peace." Her breath caught. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean to hurt her. I'll do anything, apologize, pay, anything." Luca tilted his head, as if considering her words. Then he nodded toward one of his men, who stepped forward carrying a small tablet. He placed it on the table in front of Emma. On the screen was the viral video of her spilling the water, replaying from multiple angles. The comments were brutal, people calling her heartless, demanding she be fired, boycotting the restaurant. The world already punished you, Lucas said calmly. But that's not enough for me. Emma's pulse quickened. Please, I'm begging you, she said through tears. I didn't know who she was. Lucas' expression darkened slightly. You didn't have to know who she was, he said. You only had to treat her like a human being. His words hit harder than any threat. He leaned back in his chair, his tone softening, though his eyes remained cold. I'm not a cruel man, Miss Carter. If I were, you wouldn't be sitting here. My wife asked me to let you go unharmed. She believes in forgiveness. I, however, believe in lessons. He nodded again, and one of his men placed an envelope on the table. Inside is a letter, Lucas said. You will hand-deliver it to the shelter on 5th Street tomorrow morning. My wife funds that shelter for women who have suffered abuse, discrimination, and worse. You will volunteer there for 6 months. No salary, no excuses. Consider it your penance. Emma blinked in disbelief. Of all the outcomes she had feared, this one felt almost merciful but also humiliating. 6 months? She repeated faintly. Yes, Lucas said. Every day. If you fail to show up, my men will know. And next time, it won't be me you answer to. She nodded quickly, unable to stop the tears spilling down her face. Thank you, she whispered, though the words felt hollow. Lucas stood, signaling that their conversation was over. As he turned to leave, he paused, glancing back at her one last time. Do you know what she said to me when she came home last night? He asked quietly. Emma shook her head. She said she wasn't angry. She said she pitied you. She said people like you live small lives because they can't see past the surface. I didn't understand what she meant at first, but now, I think I do. With that, he walked away, his men following in silence. Emma sat there, trembling, staring at the untouched envelope. She opened it slowly, revealing the letter inside, a neatly written note signed by Isabella Moretti herself. The handwriting was elegant, graceful. We all have moments we wish we could take back. It read, This is yours. Use it to become better, not bitter. The words blurred as tears filled Emma's eyes again. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her mind kept replaying everything, her cruelty, the look in Isabella's eyes, Luca's voice echoing in her head. The next morning, as the sun rose over the city, Emma found herself standing outside the shelter on 5th Street, the letter clutched tightly in her hand. Inside, women and children moved quietly through the halls, their faces marked by pain, but also resilience. The woman at the front desk smiled softly when Emma introduced herself and explained why she was there. We've been expecting you, she said gently. As Emma began her first day, mopping floors and serving meals, she felt the weight of her actions pressing down on her. But also, for the first time, something else understanding. She watched the women who had suffered far more than she ever could, and she began to see the world through different eyes. Somewhere far away, Isabella sat by her window, watching the morning light touch the city skyline. She knew her husband had done what he thought was right, but she also knew that real change only came from within. And for Emma, that change had just begun.